This video is going to be regarding binomial distributions. I have here an example problem that I am going to be solving. The answers are already displayed. I will now go about showing you how to get these answers. But first off, a student must pass through 12 sets of traffic lights on his way to university. Suppose that each of the lights is green 38.4% of the time, yellow 5.1% of the time, and red 56.5% of the time. Suppose also that the traffic lights function independently. Alright, so the first question we have is, let x be the number of red lights encountered by the student on his way to university. The mean and variance of x are respectively. Now, to calculate the mean and the variance of x for a binomial distribution, we use the formula. We use mean. Mean is equal to the sample size multiply the proportion. So in this question, our sample size is going to be 12 because the student is passing through 12 sets of light. So we're going to be having 12 repetitions of a sort of a random sample. Now the proportion, because we're dealing with, as it mentions, red lights, the probability of getting a red light is 56.5%. So we put 0.565. And now if you actually do the calculation here, you will get 6.78, which is the answer we got over there. Now how to calculate variance? Variance is calculated by sigma squared, which is also the denotation for variance, is equal to the sample size multiply the proportion multiply 1, subtract the proportion. So our sample size is 12. Our proportion is 0.565. 1 subtract 0.565. And now if you were to actually do this calculation, you will get 2.9493, which is the answer. So this is how you would calculate the mean and the variance of something regarding a binomial distribution. You just need to have the proportion and the sample size. So let's move on to the next question. What is the probability that the student encounters exactly 5 red lights on his way to university one day? So the formula we're going to be using for this question is going to be P. So whenever the probability is equaling, or let's say the probability of something equaling k, k is some value that we're going to be trying to determine. In this case, it's 5. So whenever the probability of x, which is going to be the random sample, equaling exactly some value that we're trying to get, in this case, as I said, it's going to be 5, that is going to be equivalent to saying nk multiply the proportion to the k value multiply 1 subtract the proportion to the n minus k. Now, as I said, k is going to be the value that we're trying to get for the sample to be exactly equal to. N is going to be our sample size, P is the proportion. So all that's left to do, because we have all the data, is to fill in the values. So first off, N is going to be 12, because notice it states it's occurring in one day, and a student only has to travel through 12 sets of traffic lights on one day of him going to the university. If he had to go 2 days and you wanted to detect some sort of probability, you would have to use 24 as your sample size. But since we're only doing one day, it's only 12. So it's going to be 12, then we have a k value of it being exactly 5, multiply the proportion of which is the red light, so it's going to be 0.565 to the k value, that's going to be 5, multiply 1, subtract our proportion, 0.565, and it's going to be 12, subtract 5. Now another way to write this first part right here, this 12.5, is going to be 12 exclamation mark over 5 exclamation mark multiply, and then it's going to be 12 subtract 5, so it's going to be 7 exclamation mark. Now what these individual exclamation marks mean, in case you forgot, 5 exclamation mark would be equivalent to saying 1 multiply 2 multiply 3 multiply 4 multiply 5. That's what's going on here. Your calculator most likely has the option of using the exclamation mark function, so be sure to look for that, or else it's going to be very inconvenient to do these calculations. Now, if you're to actually solve this calculation out, you would get an answer somewhere around 0.1344. If you were to round it off, it would equal 0.1344. And that, as you can see, is the answer. So there was a 13% probability that you would encounter exactly 5 red lights on one day going to the university, assuming that you pass through 12 traffic lights. Now let's move on to the next question. I'll leave that formula up there. Actually, I'm just going to move it up a bit. There we are. So, what is the probability that the student encounters at least 3 green lights on his way to university one day? Notice it states at least 3 green lights. This means we're going to be wanting to find the probability of getting the lights 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, and 8 times. All of those possible situations. So one of the best ways to find this, the most convenient way, is going to be to find the probability of getting the lights up to 2. So the probability of getting no lights, 1 light, and 2 lights. This would give you the probability of getting less than 3 lights. Then what we do is do 1 subtract the probability of getting something less than 3, and that would give you the probability of getting something greater than 3, which is going to be something that's going to be at least 3 or more, which is going to be equivalent to getting x being greater than or equal to 3. So let's continue. In order to do this calculation, it's rather tedious. We're going to be using this formula for the case that we're going to be getting no green lights, then 1 green light, and then 2 green lights. Then after that, we're going to be adding all of those probabilities up, and then we're going to be doing 1 subtract all those probabilities to get our answer. So, first off, we're going to be having a sample size of 12. The k value down here is going to be 0. Our p-value, the proportion, as you can see over here, the green light proportion is going to be 38.4%, or 0.384. And that's going to be to the k value of 0, multiply 1, subtract the proportion again, 0.384, then to the n minus k, n being the sample size, subtract k being the target thing, whatever the sample might be exactly equal to. In this case, we're trying to find 0, so it's going to be 12 subtract 0, or just going to the 12. Oops, sorry, I didn't notice this thing right here. Okay, so if you were to follow through with this calculation, you will get something around 0.002985 or so. Now, because we're going to be adding this value to a bunch of other ones later, I'm going to be just moving this aside and keeping that for later. Now let's do this calculation for the other values. Now, after you do all of the calculations, you're going to be getting the value of 1. If you were to find the probability of getting exactly 1 green light, you will get an answer of 0.02, oops, those don't really look like zeros, 0.02233 or so. If you were to do this calculation for 2 this time, you would get a value around 0.07656. So just to be clear, this value right here, this one is what you would get if you tried to find the probability using this formula up here of getting exactly 2 from the sample. So this would be 2, this is 1, and this is the probability of getting none. Now the next step to do is add all of these probabilities together. If you were to do that, you would get 0.110 or 0.187 or so. Now the next step, this is the probability of getting something that's less than 3, but we want something that's at least equal to and greater than 3. So the next step we have to do is 1 subtract the value we got down there, which is 0.10187. And that gives me a value of 0.89 0.81, which, as you can see over here, oops, where is my cursor? It is the answer. So that is how you find the answer to that particular question. Let's move on to the last one now. So, in a 5-day school week, what is the probability that the student encounters exactly 6 yellow lights on his way to university? Now this question is a bit hard to understand because it has a little trick inside, something that most students would overlook. Notice that it's mentioning a 5-day school week. It's difficult to understand exactly how to interpret this. Well, if you just take a look at the initial question, it states, a student must pass through 12 sets of traffic lights on his way to university. Now that's in one day, but since there's a 5-day school week, you just have to multiply the 12 of one day by 5, because there's a 5-day school week they're mentioning in this particular question. So you would get 60. Our new sample size then, or our new population, is going to be 60. And because it's 60, that is really the only changed variable in this question. The rest of it is pretty much the calculation from question 2, or question B, I guess, in this case, this one. We want to know the probability of getting exactly 6 yellow lights. Since our population is going to be 60, the value we're trying to calculate is going to be 6. We're going to want to do this, multiply our proportion of the yellow lights, which is going to be 5.1% or 0.051, to the k value of 6, multiply 1, subtract the proportion, 0.051, to the n minus k, which is going to be 60 minus 6, or 54. Now all you need to do is solve out this calculation here and you will get your answer. We would get an answer of around 0.05215 or so. But if you want to have it to 4 decimal places, it would be 0.0522, which is what we got over here. That is how you how you find the answers to these questions regarding binomial distributions. I hope this might have helped you if you were having some trouble. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask in the comments section and I will do my best to answer them. Have a nice day.